All right, so get ready because we are taking a deep dive today into Habits and Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah,
We all hear so much about how important habits are, but we're going way deeper today,
we are.
looking at some tactics that we can actually use to kind of hack the system,
Exactly.
make those habits stick. And by the end of this deep dive, you will not just understand how habits work,
Yeah.
but you'll be able to actually start building better ones for yourself.
Yeah, it's not just theory, it's about really understanding the nuts and bolts
Right.
of how your brain forms habits and then giving you the tools to engineer them in a way that serve you.
I love that. Okay, so James Clear talks about these atomic habits, which are basically these tiny changes that compound over time.
Right.
But it's not just about like doing something small every day, right?
Right. It's about consistency and leverage.
Yep.
Think of it like investing small amounts of money regularly.
Okay.
Over time, those tiny contributions build up significant wealth through the power of compounding, and it's the same with habits.
So instead of trying to like overhaul our entire lives overnight,
Right.
we should focus on making these small incremental changes.
Exactly. One of the most powerful strategies from the book is the 2-minute rule.
Okay.
It's about breaking down a daunting task into something so small that it takes less than 2 minutes to start.
Okay.
So instead of saying, I'm going to clean the entire house, you say, I'm going to put away 5 things.
Okay, it sounds almost too simple, but I guess the idea is that once you start, you're more likely to keep going.
Right. It removes that initial resistance
Yeah.
and creates momentum.
Right.
And over time, those small actions add up.
I can see how that would work, but what about those times when you are putting in the effort, but you're not seeing any immediate results?
Oh, absolutely.
That can be so discouraging.
Yeah, that's where the concept of the plateau of latent potential comes in.
Okay.
It's like a plant growing roots before it sprouts above the ground.
Okay.
You might not see those roots, but they're essential for the plant's eventual growth.
I like that analogy. It's like you're building this foundation, even though it's invaluable for a while.
Exactly. Your consistent effort is building up, even if you can't see the payoff yet.
Okay.
It's like pushing a heavy boulder up a hill.
Well,
It takes a lot of force initially, but once it reaches that tipping point,
yeah.
it rolls effortlessly down the other side.
Powerful image.
Yeah.
So how do we apply this plateau idea to our own habits?
It's about trusting the process.
Okay.
Those early mornings at the gym, those
Yeah.
extra minutes spent studying, they're all contributing to something bigger, even if you can't see it yet.
Yeah.
You're laying the groundwork for future success.
Okay, so small changes, consistency, and trusting the process.
Yes.
That's a pretty solid foundation.
Absolutely.
But one thing that always trips me up is setting goals. Like, I feel like I'm constantly setting them and then falling short.
That's a common struggle, and that's why James Clear emphasizes the importance of shifting our focus from goals to systems.
So what's the difference exactly?
A goal is a specific outcome you want to achieve, like losing 10 pounds or writing a book.
All right.
A system is the collection of habits that support that goal.
Okay.
So instead of fixating on the outcome, you focus on building a sustainable routine that moves you in the right direction.
So it's like having a roadmap instead of just a destination.
Precisely.
I like.
With goals, you can get caught in this cycle of like setting, achieving, and then falling back into old patterns.
Oh, no.
It's that classic yo-yo effect.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, we've all been there.
So how do we actually create these systems then?
It starts with identifying the small, repeatable actions that will support your desired outcome.
Okay.
So if your goal is to lose weight, your system might include habits like cooking healthy meals, exercising regularly, tracking your calories.
So it's not about making these massive, unsustainable changes.
Right.
It's more about incorporating small, manageable habits into our daily lives.
Exactly. It's about creating a system that's so ingrained in your routine that it becomes almost automatic.
That's fascinating, but realistically, even with the best systems in place, we're still going to face those moments of resistance, right?
Absolutely. And that's where the concept of identity-based habits comes in.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are those?
It's the idea that our actions become a reflection of who we believe we are.
Okay.
Instead of saying, I want to lose weight, you start thinking, I am a healthy person who makes healthy choices.
So you're shifting your self-image to align with your desired habits.
Precisely. When your actions become an expression of your identity, it's easier to maintain them because they feel congruent with who you are.
Okay, but isn't focusing on identity a bit too abstract? Like, how does that translate to concrete actions?
It starts with small wins.
Okay.
Remember Brian Clark, the guy who overcame nail biting by scheduling a manicure?
Right. That story was amazing.
That simple action shifted his identity from nail biter to someone who cares for their nails.
So even a small action can have a ripple effect on our self-perception.
Exactly. It's about those small wins that reinforce the belief that you are the type of person who does X, Y, or Z.
This is really making me rethink my whole approach to habits. So if we want to build better habits, where do we even begin?
Well, we need to understand the habit loop cue, craving, response, reward.
All right, let's break it down. So what's the first stage? The cue.
The cue is the trigger that initiates the habit.
Okay.
It could be anything in your environment, a specific time of day, or even an emotional state. It's basically a signal to your brain that it's time to perform a certain action.
So like the smell of coffee in the morning cueing you to start brewing a pot.
Exactly, or seeing your running shoes by the door, cueing you to go for a run.
Okay, so the cue sets the stage. What happens next?
Next comes the craving, and it's not actually the habit itself we crave, but the change in state it promises.
So it's not the coffee itself we crave, but the feeling of alertness and energy it gives us.
Precisely, the craving is what motivates us to take action.
All right, so we have the cue, the craving. What about the actual habit itself?
That's the response. The actual behavior you perform and the likelihood of you performing that response depends on two things: your motivation and the friction associated with the behavior.
So if it's too difficult or inconvenient, we're less likely to follow through even if we have the craving.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to make our desired habits as easy as possible to perform.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So what's the final stage?
The reward, this is the payoff that satisfies the craving and reinforces that entire habit loop.
So in the coffee example, the reward would be that feeling of alertness and focus you get after that first sip.
Exactly. The reward is what teaches your brain that this particular action is worth repeating.
And this entire loop from cue to reward happens without us even thinking about it.
For the most part, yes. Once a habit is formed, it becomes almost automatic.
Wow.
And that's both the beauty and the danger of habits.
Okay, now I'm really seeing the power of understanding this loop.
Mm-hmm.
It means we can actually engineer our habits by manipulating these different stages, right?
Exactly. We can make the cues for our desired habits more obvious, make the cravings more intense, make the responses easier to perform, and make the rewards more satisfying.
So we're not just at the mercy of our habits. We can actually take control.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll dive into next.
This is incredible.
Huh.
I can't wait to learn more about these practical tools. Okay, so we've unpacked a lot about the science behind these habits, this habit loop. It's so powerful. But how do we actually put this knowledge into practice?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of practical tools that James Clear outlines in Atomic Habits, and we can dive into a couple that I think might really resonate with you. One of my favorites is habit stacking.
Okay, I've heard of that one. It's about linking new habits to existing routines, right? Like piggybacking on something you already do consistently.
Exactly. So think about those rock-solid habits. You have things you do automatically without even thinking. Brushing your teeth, making coffee, taking a shower. These are like anchors in your day.
Yeah, I can't imagine starting my day without coffee.
Right. So the idea is to leverage those anchors. Let's say you want to start meditating each morning.
Okay.
Instead of relying on willpower alone, you could stack it onto your coffee routine. After I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 2 minutes.
Okay, so simple. But I can see how it would make that new habit almost automatic. You're not even giving yourself a chance to overthink it.
Precisely. You're removing the decision fatigue and making the new behavior part of an already established routine.
I love that it's like sneaking in a healthy habit without even realizing it.
Yeah.
So what are some other tools we can use to make these new behaviors stick?
Another powerful technique is implementation intentions.
Okay.
It's about creating a clear plan that specifies exactly when and where you'll perform a desired action.
So instead of just vaguely saying, I'm going to exercise more,
Yeah,
you'd create a specific plan like every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. I'll go for a run in the park.
exactly. By being hyper-specific, you're reducing reliance on willpower and increasing the chances of actually following through. There's less room for excuses or second-guessing.
Yeah, this is great. I think I fall into that vague intention trap all the time. It feels good to say, I'm going to eat healthier, but without a clear plan, it's so easy to let it slide.
It's a common trap, but remember, you don't have to be perfect. Start small, focus on consistency, and those small wins will start to snowball.
Okay, so we've got habit stacking, implementation intentions, anything else that can give us that extra edge.
Well, understanding the role of dopamine can be a game changer. You know, that neurotransmitter that's all about pleasure and reward.
Yeah, I've heard dopamine makes us feel good. but I don't really understand how it relates to habits.
It's actually at the heart of habit formation. Dopamine is released when we experience something pleasurable,
Okay.
and it reinforces the behavior that led to that pleasure.
So it's like our brain's way of saying, hey, that felt good, let's do it again.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that the anticipation of a reward can be just as motivating as the reward itself.
Oh, wow, that explains a lot about my online shopping habits. The excitement of clicking buy and waiting for that package.
Yeah, we've all been there. But think about how you can use this to your advantage with good habits. Make them enjoyable in the short term, even if the big payoff is further down the road.
So if I'm trying to establish a reading habit, but I struggle to stay focused,
Mm.
maybe I should start with books that genuinely interest me,
Yeah,
instead of forcing myself to read something educational that feels like a chore.
exactly. Or if you dread going to the gym, maybe find a workout buddy or try a dance class that you actually enjoy.
That's such a good point. It's like making the journey itself enjoyable, not just focusing on the destination.
Precisely. Work with your brain's natural reward system. If you can find ways to make the process itself pleasurable, you're much more likely to stick with it.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about atomic habits, the habit loop, the power of systems, even the role of dopamine. Is there anything else we can do to help these new habits really take root?
Yes, one thing that often gets overlooked is the power of our environment. James Clear dives into this fascinating study that was done at Massachusetts General Hospital.
Oh, I love hearing about real-world experiments. Tell me more.
So they were looking at ways to improve the eating habits of the staff and visitors, but instead of launching this big campaign or lecture series,
Right.
they did something much more subtle. They simply rearranged the cafeteria.
Really, like just moving the furniture around?
Well, more like strategically placing certain food and drink options.
Okay.
They added water as an option in the refrigerators that previously only had soda, and they placed baskets of bottled water near the food stations.
Wait, so they didn't actually tell anyone to drink more water or drink less soda.
Right.
They just made those choices more accessible.
Exactly, and the results were pretty amazing over 3 months. Soda sales dropped significantly, while water sales skyrocketed.
That's incredible. So just by changing the environment, they influenced people's behavior without even saying a word.
Precisely, it highlights how powerful our surroundings can be in shaping our choices, often without us even realizing it.
So it's not just about willpower. It's about setting ourselves up for success by designing an environment that supports our desired habits.
Absolutely. It's about making the cues for good habits more obvious and the cues for bad habits less visible.
So if I want to read more, I could put a book on my bedside table instead of my phone. If I want to eat healthier, I could keep a bowl of fruit on the counter instead of a jar of cookie.
Exactly. It's about making those good choices the path of least resistance.
So empowering. It means we have so much more control over our habits than we realize. But it also makes me think about the flip side. What if we're surrounded by an environment that's kind of working against us?
That's a great point, and it underscores the importance of being mindful of our surroundings and making conscious choices about the environments we expose ourselves to.
Okay, so we've talked about the power of our physical environment,
Yeah.
but what about our social environment? I feel like the people we spend time with have a huge impact on our habits too.
You're absolutely right. We are social creatures, and our habits are heavily influenced by those around us.
Like if your friends are all into fitness, you're probably more likely to work out yourself.
Right.
Or if you're surrounded by people who really value reading and learning, you're more likely to pick up those habits too.
Exactly. It's like our social circles create this invisible force field that shape our behavior.
So if you're trying to cultivate new habits, it might be helpful to surround yourself with people who already embody those traits.
Absolutely. Join a running club, find a book club, connect with people who share your passion for healthy cooking. The power of community can make a world of difference.
It's like having this built-in support system, cheering you on and holding you accountable.
Precisely. And even if you don't have that in-person community, there are so many online groups and forums where you can connect with like-minded people.
That's great advice. I think I often underestimate the power of my social circle.
It's a powerful force. And remember, habit formation isn't just this solo endeavor.
Right.
It's about leveraging the power of our environment, both physical and social, to support our growth.
Wow, this has been such an incredible deep dive into the world of habits.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, from the science behind habit formation to practical tools that you can implement right away.
We've explored the habit loop, the role of environment, the power of community, and so much more.
And if there's one thing I hope you take away from this deep dive, it's this.
Small changes can lead to extraordinary results.
Yes. Don't underestimate the power of those tiny actions repeated consistently over time.
Whether it's reading one page a day, adding a vegetable to your plate, or meditating for 2 minutes.
Those atomic habits have the potential to transform your life in ways you might never have imagined.
So keep experimenting, keep exploring, and remember.
Even the smallest step in the right direction is progress.
And with that, we'll leave you to ponder those tiny habits that could have a big impact on your future. Until next time, happy habit building.
You know, it's funny how we always think about habits in terms of these like grand sweeping changes.
Right.
But what we've been talking about today really highlights like the power of those tiny tweaks.
That over time just completely reshape your reality.
It's not about massive overhauls. It's about those micro adjustments that compound like interest in a savings account.
Right.
Imagine committing to reading just one page before bed each night.
A year from now, you've read hundreds of the pages, maybe even dozens of books.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think about all the areas of my life where this could apply. Like, what if I started adding a single vegetable to my dinner plate each day?
You'd be so surprised how much healthier your diet would become
Right.
without feeling deprived.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about deprivation. It's about those tiny additions that add up.
It's like that saying, inch by inch life's a cinch, yard by yard life is hard.
Exactly. And you can apply these small shifts to any area of your life, finances, fitness, relationships, even creativity.
Yeah.
You know what's one tiny thing you could add to your day that would move you towards a goal?
Okay, I'm hooked on this idea. It feels so much more manageable than trying to change everything at once. But speaking of things that can feel overwhelming, I'm curious to hear more about how we can really hack our environments to support these new habits.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets fascinating. James Clear talks about how our surroundings can subtly nudge us towards certain behaviors without us even realizing it.
You mentioned that study at Massachusetts General Hospital earlier. Are there other examples of how we can kind of use our environment to our advantage?
Absolutely. Think about something as simple as wanting to drink more water. What if you kept a refillable water bottle on your desk at all times?
Out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah.
But if it's right there, you're more likely to reach for it throughout the day.
Exactly. And it's not just about making the good choices more visible. It's also about making those less desirable choices harder to access.
Okay.
What if you kept those tempting snacks tucked away in a cupboard instead of out on the counter?
Oh, that's a good one. It's like
Yeah.
setting yourself up for success without even realizing it.
Precisely, you're creating an environment where those healthier choices become the path of least resistance. And speaking of support systems, don't forget about the power of your social circle.
Right, we talked about that earlier. If you're surrounded by people who share your values and your aspirations, it makes those positive changes so much easier to stick to.
It's true. It's like having a built-in cheering section, encouraging you along the way. But I want to challenge you to think even beyond your immediate circle. What about seeking out online communities or groups that align with your goals?
Oh, that's a great point. There are so many resources available these days to connect with like-minded people.
Exactly. Whether it's a fitness forum, a book club, or a support group for people working on a specific habit, connecting with others can provide a sense of accountability and motivation that can make a world of difference.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the world of habits.
Yeah, we've explored the science, the strategies,
Yeah.
and the power of both our environment and our community in shaping our behavior.
If there's one thing I hope you take away from this, it's that you have more control over your habits than you might realize.
It's not about overnight transformations or relying solely on willpower.
Right.
It's about understanding the mechanics of habit formation and using those insights to your advantage.
And remember, even the smallest changes consistently applied can lead to really remarkable results over time.
So as you go about your day, start noticing those little cues, those tiny decisions that shape your actions, and ask yourself, how can I tweak those to create a life that aligns with my aspirations?
That's a great question to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into atomic habits. Until next time, happy habit building.